Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back. This is another episode of Multifamily Unplugged. It is Saturday morning, and I hope you are enjoying your weekend. Hey, hope you have your coffee this morning. Buckle up. We're in for a good ride. As usual, we have great guests this morning that we'll get to here in a minute, but I want to ask you about your intentionality this morning. What are you being intentional about? You know, I think our mindset is so important and so impactful in what we do on a day-to-day basis in our business. You know, a lot of times we can sit back, especially in this market environment that we're in right now. A lot of times we can sit back and say, oh, the interest rates are too high. The market's not good. People aren't doing anything. Investors aren't investing. When, you know, we buy into that rhetoric of that negativity, of that negative mindset, of course, it's going to keep you from moving forward. So, you know, I always encourage you to be intentional about your thoughts, about your actions. You know, Napoleon Hill said, you know, what you believe you can achieve, right? And it's the same thing in everything that we do in our lives. And I want to encourage you to be intentional. So, you know, what if you were to sit down every day and just write out what your intentions are for that day? How many private investors are you going to talk to about raising capital? How many deals are you going to underwrite? What activities, what actions are you going to take? Start to create that mindset for you that's going to open the doors for you. So, hey, if you're new to the show, welcome. Thanks for being here. I'm Mike Morawski. I'm your bounce back coach and real estate cash flow expert. And if you are new, please follow us, subscribe, do us a favor. We are here every week working with you and bringing you the gift of somebody who's a little bit smarter than we are. This morning, my guest, best-selling author, Joel Miller. Joel's calling in from Erie, Pennsylvania. He wrote a book called Build Real Estate Wealth, and we're going to dive into that and talk about that this morning. So let me bring Joel in. Morning, Joel. How are you?
Oh, Mike, I'm excited because I just really loved your intro there, and I'm going to show you something. Napoleon Hill, Grow Rich with Peace of Mind, is follow-up to Think and Grow Rich. You know, this is one of, if I'm on a podcast and somebody says, oh, tell me a book that influenced you, this is what I pull out.
Wow.
So
and that's
so cool you said that.
That's different than Think and Grow Rich. You know, everybody talks about Think and Grow Rich, but show that book again, if you would.
Okay. I had to reach down here to get it.
That's all right.
Yeah.
So that's Napoleon Hill's Grow Rich with Peace of Mind. I love that. That looks like it's got some miles on it.
Yeah, you know, my copyright is 1967 on the inner cover of this book. That's the edition that this one is.
That's almost as old as we are.
I read whenever I was getting started.
That's almost as old as we are, Joel.
Maybe a little older.
Oh, anyhow,
I always love what you had to say about mindset, because I spent a lot of time on that in my book. It's one of the things that makes my book different from a lot of books in the genre, which are about acquiring the property and taking care of it and having tenants and all that stuff. I start with mindset, and we spend time on that before we even talk about, and then we go into forming an entity before we even talk about buying a property.
Yeah, well, I think we'll talk a little bit about that this morning. You know, we'll circle back to that. Hey, you know, one thing, one question I always ask my guests, and this is really the only question I ever have pre-planned or asked, but in one word, what best describes you personally and professionally?
Loyal.
Loyal. Yeah. Love that. Why? What makes you loyal?
Because, and I have a discussion about this in the book after we get done with all the how to have property stuff. It talks about like the difference between riches and wealth. And it's kind of like the difference between knowledge and wisdom. You know, knowledge is you have the facts. Wisdom is you know how to apply the facts to do the right thing. And with riches, you have the money, you know, but wealth is when you are using your money to do the right thing to better your life in the community. And I have a thing that I say that if I had a choice of losing all my money or losing all my relationships, I would lose all my money in a heartbeat, because my relationships would help me get my money back. If I just had a pile of money and no relationships to share it with, that would just be empty. And that's not what the goal is here. And so what I say is, don't make a withdrawal from a relationship just to make a deposit in your bank account.
Hmm.
So what I'm getting at is that relationships are what's key. And if you have relationships, you have to be loyal.
And we're in a business that relationships are so important,
Yeah.
just even you and I connecting this morning, I feel an energy between us. We've never met before, but, I feel like we have some synergies between us that could cause us to build a relationship.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, right. And you you have relationships at a whole bunch of different levels with operating rental property. I mean, you have relationships with buyers and sellers, depending on which part of that equation you're in. If you're in the rental business, you have relationships with your tenants. And of course, if you just simply have property, whether you're flipping or having rentals or whatever, you've got to have relationships with contractors, with suppliers, and with lenders. All that helps this all run. And if you fall out of relationships, let's say all the relationships in any of those areas, any one of those areas, you're out of business.
Yeah.
So I say loyal because that's what keeps the relationship going,
Right.
and not looking for ways to wring every dime out of every transaction, or something that ends up with somebody feeling slighted, or uh, just having a quote unquote bad taste in their mouth about dealing with you. You can't have that.
Yeah, I'm in the coaching business, and one of the things I always teach my coaching clients is create a win-win situation.
Yeah.
If you're in a transaction and you walk away feeling like you got the upper hand, that's not a winning situation.
Yeah.
If you're in a relationship or in a acquisition, and you walk away from a contract negotiation feeling like you lost, that's not winning either. I think both people have to feel an equal amount of win in every transaction.
Yeah, sure. And actually, in the real estate business, you can have more than two people winning. You're talking about just like a buyer and seller sort of thing primarily.
Yeah.
But let's say you're gonna flip a house or something like that. It might be a five-way win between you, the seller, the banker maybe that doesn't want to hold his property, doesn't want to foreclose, the neighbors, where they get to see an improved property next door to them, and the person that buys that house that you have rehab to perfection, and now you've created a beautiful place for somebody to live. Everybody wins.
Right. Right.
Oh.
Yeah. I always say in a deal that there's two groups of people, right? You have the stakeholders and the shareholders. Your shareholders are probably your limited partners when they're investing in a syndication, but those shareholders are important too. Those are the people, the little convenience store in the neighborhood that gets an impact because you fixed your property up, or the gas
Right.
station on the corner, or the neighbor who's next door.
Mhm.
It does make a difference.
Exactly.
Hey,
Yeah.
let me ask you this real quick. Have you always been loyal, or do you think that that's something that you learned over time?
Oh my gosh, learn it the hard way. I know,
Hmm.
I'm not saying I learned it late on in life, but I just mean growing up and moving through adolescence, and like a lot of kids, I had a tough time in junior high, and maybe a little bit into high school. And I had some experiences in high school that really helped me with my job. I worked all summer at a summer camp. I was on permanent staff with kids that didn't know each other, that came together and had to work together as a unit to be on the staff. And I made lifelong friends that I still have today. And that was in the 70s, when I did that. And um, as I moved through that, and then into employment and self-employment, and that just those life experiences was like, buffing or
Yeah.
sandpaper sometimes,
Yeah.
or grinding sometimes, to get you where you need to go. I don't think people are absolutely born with that sort of thing. I think loyalty is learned,
Yeah.
sometimes the hard way.
I was just going to say, I think so many things in life we learn the hard way,
Yeah.
and I think a lot of times we create that ourselves, that difficulty, but it
Mhm.
doesn't always have to be hard. You
Yeah.
know, I always heard when I was younger, listen to older people because they have more wisdom, but no, you always think when you're younger, you're smarter than everybody else.
Yeah. It's like the guy that says, yeah, man, my dad didn't know anything, but he sure learned a lot by the time I was about 30.
Yeah.
Really, what was happening is you were just realizing how much your father already knew.
Right, right. Hey, so listen, why don't you take a minute or so here and just kind of give a synopsis of your background and what you do, what you've done, and where you're at today?
Well, a couple of things happened to me in junior high. We were talking about formative years there that really set me on the two main paths that I've had in life. Number one, an investor built four-unit apartment buildings at the edge of our subdivision, right on my paper, because I got all those tenants as customers on my paper. That was a good thing. And I have a distinct memory of sitting down in my bedroom right in about eighth grade and kind of doing the math on rental property, because we all lived in, this subdivision with our parents in a single family home that they owned. So this whole thing where, okay, those people live there, they don't own that, they pay to be there, and somebody else owns it and makes money. Whatever rudimentary understanding I could have of it at that time, it was enough for me to say, I want to do that. And I kind of put that in my back pocket, so that that was something that I would do later on. And the other thing that happened was that an older kid in the community built a pirate radio station in their basement. A pirate radio station is a illegal, unlicensed radio
Sure.
station, and I got to hang out there. And that's where I decided I wanted to be a disc jockey, which I assumed was going to be on the radio. And I actually did a lot of radio production in high school, and went to a college to major in accounting because I wanted to get that background for whatever I was headed into in accounting, but also a college that had a really good campus radio station. And I worked at the radio station in the town where I was at college, and so on. And about halfway through college, I got called back to the big 50,000 watt FM top 40 radio station in my town to be the weekend guy, because they knew me from my production work in high school. So I transferred colleges back to Erie here, and just before I graduated, I went straight through in 4 years, didn't change my major. That job went full time. And so on the radio. So that meant that I could take the calls from the kids at the schools that wanted the DJs at the radio station to come out and do the sock hops in their gyms, or record
Yeah.
hops, whatever. And I went out, Mike, I made $75 and it changed my life. And that was in 1976. I ended up being able to realize I could make more money in one night than I was making all week at the radio station, raised my prices a little bit, And so I actually ended up pioneering the professional mobile disc jockey business in this part of the country. And I did that for 35 years. I retired from that in 2011, but I did 5,051 appearances. And it wasn't long after I did that first mobile DJ appearance and left the radio station. Then several months later that I bought my first rental property in January of 1978, and I still have it. I was out there yesterday. It's a cash cow. And that was what I did then, in addition to starting an accounting practice.
Hey, hang on one second. Just put a pin in the accounting firm for a minute. I want people to take in what you just said about your first rental property you bought in 1978 and you still own it. It's 2025.
Mm-hmm.
And you said it's a cash cow. I want people that are listening this morning just to absorb the impact of that. And obviously you probably don't owe anything on that property.
No, I haven't for many years.
Yeah, and it's cash coming in. So
Mhm.
so
Yeah, I actually own the first 3 properties that I bought.
oh, interesting.
which were all 2 or 3 unit places. That's all. Yeah.
That's unbelievable. So go ahead, go back to the accounting firm.
I did start in accounting practice after college, but I sold that after about 4 or 5 years because the DJ business was really blowing up, and so was the rental property stuff. And that leads me to one of the major premises of the book is that real estate investing does not have to be an either or thing, which sometimes holds people out of getting involved because they think they've either got to do only that or not. And my point is that you can add rental real estate to something else that you are passionate about, a career that you don't want to give up, a job or something, or a hobby that takes a lot of your time that you also want to do. And that's what I did with the mobile DJ business. I wanted to be a professional entertainer, for 35 years. And so my point is that if your objective is to invest in enough things that you can leave your job as soon as possible, that's great. My book provides those tools. But if you feel that you just want to add income to something else you don't want to give up while you bolster your retirement, which whatever you're not giving up is maybe not offering you, like when you're self-employed, your retirement's up to you, so you can do that, and the book provides the tools to do that. So then after a number of years of just building my rental property portfolio and continuing to do the DJ appearances, in about 1991, started flipping houses, and I have flipped over 100 houses over the years. And in 2018, got into something that gives me great pleasure, which is I became a hard money lender to the other investors in our area. And it's great to be a part of the equation for the journeys that investors that are a little earlier on are having. And then in 2020, started when I'm sitting around the house when we can't go anywhere during COVID, I started taking notes, and that was the beginning of the book being written. And I have to tell you that it was also at about that time that my son, who at the time was about 14 or 15 years old, it became apparent that he was wanting to follow me in the rental property business. And so, Mike, I have to tell you that although it took me 4 years to write this book, and it came out last fall finally, it was basically written as though he may be the only person who reads it. In other words, there's nothing in there that I haven't done or that I wouldn't do if I had the opportunity, and that I wouldn't tell my own son to do. It was not written as though I would never meet the people that would read it, and I just put stuff in there that I thought would sell a book, and I would never be held accountable by them or anything like that. The person that holds me accountable to what's in this book lives down the hall. And he graduated from high school last year, 2024, and bought his first rental property about a week after he got out of high school.
Good for
And
him.
then he's in the business department at Penn State, at a branch campus in our hometown here in the business department. And he bought his second property a few months ago. So he's continuing on, and this is working out well with our plans. My wife and I plan to retire about the time that he is getting out of college, and we're working it all toward that he will literally purchase our properties, and I'll hold the financing, or we will hold the financing on them, and get a check every month from him from a mortgage instead of some money from rental income, and then it'll be his then.
Yeah, good for you. Good for you. That's awesome. That's building generational wealth.
Yeah.
Right. Hey, let's talk about your book. What's the name of your book? Do you have it? Can you show it to us?
Yeah, sure. It's called Build Real Estate Wealth, Enjoy the Journey of Rental Property Investment. Kind of a bigger book than most books in the genre. Most of them are like 200 to 300 pages, and they cover things like acquiring property and operating the property and so on. And this is about 460 pages long. But like we talked a little bit earlier, it starts with mindset, and then forming your business entity, which you should have done before you even start making offers on places, because you probably want to hold your property in some sort of an entity, and you don't want to waste time after you found a property to form the entity before you have the closing, to buy the property. But then it moves into finding, negotiating, financing property, and then preparing a property to either sell or rent. Finding tenants. We spend a lot of time on tenant selection because, or tenant screening as well. Tenant screening is only a part of tenant selection, which selection starts when you are thinking about the possibility of buying real estate, because every decision you make after that, as far as the location and the type of property it is and how you prepare the property, how you market the property, every one of those decisions slowly narrows the universe of possible people that are likely to rent your place, and then tenant screening comes in, and when you finally interface with somebody that's inquiring about the apartment, and you really have to develop a skill with that. So we spend a lot of time on that, because you might be good at finding property, fixing property, managing, doing the back office account, but if you're not good at tenant selection, you will not have a good time in this business. And it is totally possible to learn what you need to know so that you don't have the preconceptions that you and I could touch on with mindset about, being a rental property being all broken toilets and bad tenants. That's a preconception that's wrong. And it just as much as it's all unicorns and rainbows, where you end up having a little speed bump and the first thing you know, you drop out because it's harder than you thought it was. You have to have the right mindset of, making the first step and committing for follow through, taking action and following through.
So I love what you said about tenant selection.
Yeah.
And, I think that's so critically important. But here again, like loyalty, that's something you learn along the way, made some mistakes, right? Mm-hmm. So top two things that help you pick the right tenant for your property. What are the two biggest things you focus on?
Well, I focus on asking the right question, and let's make the assumption that you've advertised a unit and you've wanted people to call and talk to you about the possibility of seeing the unit, as opposed to you've advertised it and you just want them to fill out an application, and then you're online and you're never going to really talk to them until you get the showing or whatever. But let's say we're talking to people over the phone. The first thing I would say is that you would need to have the right questions to ask and the right way to ask those questions. And then you need to take it to the next level of, let's say they got through those questions and you've actually made a commitment to meet them and show them an apartment and so on. Then you need to avoid the mistakes of misjudging people once you meet them in person, and you're evaluating a filled out application. Spent a lot of time on that in the book, and that's you just don't want to make the mistake of bothering to show places to people that you're not going to rent to, and then once you do show it, you need to not make the mistake of not following through on references, especially past landlord references and current landlord references, of course, and learn to build your instincts. That's the sort of thing. But to just briefly finish telling you what we move into in the book is, I also talk about the tax implications of operating rental property business. Obviously coming from my accounting background, preparing financial statements for lenders, big subject. Spend a whole chapter on that. At some point, as you move through rentals, you're going to interface with institutional lenders, banks, whatever, and you need to be able to present your financial picture adequately. You might be good, like I say, at all the other stuff, that we talked about, including tenant selection. But in order to grow, this business runs, as you know, Mike, on OPM, other people's money.
Right.
I mean, it's great. We talk about hard money lending, which I do, and seller financing and all that, private lending and stuff. But If you have a lot of properties, you're probably going to be involved with applying for mortgages with financial institutions. And the reality is that a lot of banks have people in their 20s and 30s that are in the underwriting department that are trying to check boxes and make financial decisions about your future.
Yeah.
And if you don't make their job easy so they can get off at 4 o'clock, you know, provide them the information to check their boxes that they need and the right information for them to run their ratios and so on, then they just reject you, you know. So uh, if you can learn what the techniques are to increase your chances of being approved for loans, you're going to be able to grow a lot faster.
And how many properties do you own?
Oh, right now I've been selling off things. We're down to 20 some properties, you know, and
So at your peak, what did you own? How many did you own?
over 40.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I never was one of those, I got 100 place guys, you know. I didn't need to be, you know,
Right.
because I was operating the ones we had successfully and flipping a lot of houses too, which, you know, gives you the big checks. But obviously, if you stop flipping, you don't get those checks anymore. It's the rental property, uh, income property that provides you the ongoing income that has to come in, whether you feel well that day or not. You know, they still have an obligation to pay the rent, and that's how it works. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Where, so talk about a little bit. We kind of talked about this before the show a little bit, but let's talk about legacy a little bit. You kind of have a legacy strategy set up for your business to create generational wealth, and I want people to really imagine the impact in their own life that this could have on their life, right? What you're going to talk about in your son. I think this is a great story.
Mhm. Yeah, as I was saying, the time has come for that he has decided to move into this while he's getting some more education, you know, like traditional. If you asked him right now, he would tell you he's a finance major, you know, in the business department. But his objective is not to go to college to get a job. His objective is to never have a job. His objective is to completely make his living off of various types of rental property investment, primarily the rentals. And I'm sure he'll flip some houses along the way. And he has a little bit of a running start on it. I get it, because we have a ready stable of properties that he can buy at the right time. You know, the time we're interested in getting rid of them is the time, you know, he wants to have them. And so those people that have those leases with me will have to pay him the rent. It's not like whenever I sell the properties, their obligation ends. You know, that all transfers to the new owner, who is going to be the next generation in our family. And he'll continue. I fully believe that he will take this further than my wife and I ever did.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's that generational wealth piece, right?
Yeah.
Hey, I want to ask one question back to the other people's money and utilizing banks to leverage and buy property. Isn't there a rule with banks that you can only own 4 or 6 residential real estate loans?
That is on a per bank basis.
Got it.
That's not any kind of a law. That's not any kind of a banking regulation. That is whatever the appetite of that bank is. And that changes. We have found around here, especially, that the appetites that the banks have for different types of property gets shut on and off and changes. Like we might all be going to one particular bank because they're just loving the 1 to 4 units for a while. And then all of a sudden, hey, our portfolio's got too many of those, so we're not doing any of those anymore. Hey, you got any big commercial properties you want to have us lend on? You know, and then you got to go to a different bank. You know,
Yeah.
so it's that's an example of how they change your appetite. And one of the aspects of that can be what they feel is the maximum number of loans they want to have with you, no matter what the dollar amount is, or the maximum dollar amount they want to have loaned to you, or the number of properties that they are encumbering. That's all up to them.
Yeah, I believe there's a misconception out there of, of that rule, right? And you're right. Because I've owned 200 single family homes and I never really had a problem getting a loan, right? When we needed to get a loan, or especially a portfolio loan. So, it all depends on the bank and where you're at and what the flow of money in the market is,
Yeah, that's right.
What are you seeing right now? And I don't know if you're in an acquisition mode at all, or if you'd buy something if the right deal showed up. But what are you seeing in the environment today for buying rental property?
See, around here, and I'm a firm believer that real estate is very much a local economy. It is, and so if you're primarily investing in the town and around the town where you live, you've got to pay attention to what's happening locally more than nationally even. And around here, it's still a pretty strong market. I mean, Erie, Pennsylvania it's not one of the markets that has booms and busts. We have always just kind of chugged along over the years with some sort of a steady increase. And there were some big increases, though, more than normal in the past several years, since COVID, like a lot of markets have experienced. And that just seems to be leveling off a little bit. But and rents have come up a lot in the past several years. I mean, I think I calculated last year, our rents went up 22%. I mean, our actual rents on our properties. If I looked at the dollar amounts on the leases at the beginning of the year, at the end of the year, with all the renewals and turnovers, that's how much we were able to raise rents. And I think that is leveling off a little bit, but it's not going to drop back. There's still what I would call a bit of a housing shortage here. Nice single family homes don't last on the market very long.
Yeah, there's no doubt we've become a renter nation, and for the real estate investor, whether they're buying single family, whether they're taking advantage of the economies of scale with multifamily, there is a huge opportunity that we're sitting on today. And I believe that, and Joel, you and I are old enough to know about market cycles, right? And
yeah, we've been through a lot of them.
Right. We've been through a few. And, I know that where we're at in the market cycle today, that people that get involved today in real estate investing, whether they buy that first home that they're going to keep for 30 years, or whether they're trading in and out every 5 to 7 years like we do, are going to really experience some growth here as there's a shift in wealth in our country.
Yeah, and it's still pretty hard right now for people to shift from renting to owning in a lot of markets. I get that, and it's a shame, but only part of it is the interest rates, which are, as you know, they're kind of more normal right now. I mean, when I first got into this, bought my first property in 1978, Jimmy Carter was president, and prime was 22%. And we were struggling with inflation and so on. But that's when I bought my first property, which I still have.
Right. At 22%, you bought it.
Well, that's not that was prime. I got less than that for my mortgage rate from the bank. But, obviously prime does impact interest rates somewhat in all different types of loans, car loans, house loans, whatever. And I was a tenant for the first 5.5 years while I was also a landlord. So when I bought my first personal residence in 1983, I was pleased, Mike, to get 12.5%. I was pleased.
Yeah. Yeah.
And of course, that mortgage got refinanced out, after not too long. I obviously didn't keep that for 30 years, but but that's what I had to pay to get into my house then.
Yeah.
And so I love what you said at the beginning when you were touching on when people are just looking for the perfect moment to get involved because there's naysayers about the market's not like it used to be. It's not like it's never going to be like it was, or whatever they're saying that is making them say, oh, I'm not going to invest. I want to say that at any given time, there are good deals. There's a way to have a good deal in real estate, no matter what's going on, because there's always going to be motivated sellers. And you might have to shift your technique or your marketing, or do something that changes to the way you find your deals and put them together. But there's never a point where you should just give up.
Right.
Right.
I agree.
You
100%.
can't make money in this business. That's wrong.
Yeah. Hey, I appreciate you. I appreciate you being here this morning. We're way over what I said we would talk for, but you know what? The conversation has been great. And I hope that the listeners get a lot out of this morning, because I think we touched on some really good things to talk about. Joel, how do people get a hold of you, get your book? You want to show your book again?
Yeah. The best way is to go to the website that is dedicated to the book. It's very simple. It's joelmillerbooks.com. Pardon me. JoelMillerbooks.com. And on the homepage there, you can click on a button that'll show you the entire table of contents detail. You can see exactly what we're getting into. And also another button that'll show you sample paragraphs from each of the chapters. The media stuff, give you an example of what's in there. But if you click on the buy button on the site, it just takes you to the page on Amazon where it's available.
And we'll have that information in the show notes for people to get a hold of that. So thanks for being here. I'm going to move you to the back room, say goodbye to everybody. If you hang out with me for a minute, that'd be great.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for hanging in there on an extra long one today. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Hey, everybody. That was a great show. Had no expectations before I started this morning about my guest, about his business. And you know what? I was really encouraged, to buy your first, second, third home and still own them after, 30 years is incredible, right? I mean, how else do we build generational wealth, long-term wealth for your retirement, and then to pass on to your children or your heirs, or however you want to dismantle that in your later years. But there's no doubt that you can create wealth in real estate, and whether it's financial wealth, or whether it's a wealth of knowledge or blessing other people, any way you look at it, there's wealth to be had. So thanks for being here this morning. Hey, reach out, grab a copy of Joel's book, book, Building Real Estate Wealth. You can go to the Joel Miller Books website and get a copy of that. I'm convinced you'll really enjoy the read. Thanks for being here, everybody. Remember, we're here every Saturday morning. Today's show was sponsored by Sync VA. So if you're somebody who is in the real estate space or in business and you need that virtual assistant, whether it's an executive assistant or a transaction coordinator, or somebody helping you source deals and opportunities, reach out to Sync VA. You have the ability to partner with your VA and to help build your business. Sync VA is your source for finding that individual that's going to be the best match for you and for your business. Hey, everyone, have a great week, and I will look forward to seeing you next Saturday.